What's up, everybody? Another episode of the Brown Ballers Pod. Excited to have back with us Kishan Mystery from Uninterrupted Canada, also known as your photographer's favorite photographer. This guy has shot every single influential person in culture, in sports, in athletics. No need to be humble. Like, this guy's probably shooting them. But welcome back, man. Thanks for being on.
This is the first time in person, I guess, right? The first one was virtual and you weren't on the pod as well that time. So we're here in a nice hotel room. Thank you for accommodating me.
No, of course.
But I'm excited. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, no, for sure. Here in your city, in Toronto, I want to cover a lot of different topics with you, like especially because this is the second time we're sitting down to do this, like on the business side, on Uninterrupted, what the future looks like for all the incredible work you're doing. But maybe just to set the stage a little bit, like post-college, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah.
So post-college, so I graduated back in 2018. And even like in college, like I was still working too. So like my third and fourth year, I was working at TSN. So I never had that gap of like, oh, like, you know how when you graduate, you're like,
now it's time.
To like, or like, let me travel for the summer. And then like September I come back, like start applying for positions. But for me, it was just right into the thick of it. Like I remember like the day I graduated, I went to TSN that day and it was the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
And the Washington Capitals ended up winning that night. So like that's a good, like, I guess not anecdote, but like way my career has kind of started, like just thrown into it right away, like being that person to kind of depend on and putting myself into those situations too. So post school, I guess I've worked for 3 different companies now already, which is kind of crazy in 5 years. So TSN, Yahoo Sports, and now Uninterrupted Canada. Along that way, I guess my portfolio has kind of grown over that time. So I started as a music photographer, and then as I had opportunities at TSN, I got to start shooting sports. Like even in university, I didn't shoot any of the college athletics, which is like, that's a piece of advice that I give to people, like when starting out, like, oh, like when people DM me, but being like, oh, like how do you reach where I am, right? And my path is like not traditional in that way, so it's hard to tell people like, yeah, like my path was like graphic design, and through graphic design opportunities, I got to start working in sports. But that's not a traditional way for like a photographer shooting, let's say, high school sports, and then here in Canada it's youth sports, and then from there like maybe shoot G League, NBA, like here in Toronto. So in school, after school, definitely been busy with all that and making a name for myself. And I guess we're here in 2023, and like I can confidently say like I have a really good portfolio, and I'm working for 2 professional sports leagues as well as a seasonal kind of contract worker. So I think I'm at a good point now, and like over the next kind of couple of years, I want to like see where I can take that, where I can kind of build that momentum. Because my biggest thing is like not being complacent. Like, yeah, I could like settle into what I'm doing and just like go with the flow. Like your schedule is set, your clients are kind of set already, and just go through the motions of that. Or like I remember in 2019 when I left TSN for Yahoo Sports, that was a very big risk. And like even looking back at it, like that was the best thing that I've done for my career because it helped get my photography out there. And I got to shoot the Raptors winning the championship and all that kind of stuff. And maybe I probably would have done that at TSN too, but I don't think it would have gotten the same recognition, which is kind of crazy too. Like going to a smaller platform, especially in Canada, but getting, I guess, better results, and not to be like selfish about it too, because obviously when you're hired by a company, you have to kind of produce results for them, and you get compensated for it, right? But I think going to a smaller platform, I guess it's more individual, and people know like who's behind, like, oh, like who's tweeting tonight, who's taking photos for the account tonight, so all that kind of stuff. And I think people resonated with that, and I've been able to kind of use that to propel me, and even through the pandemic, like still having opportunities, and like I think it's been great. Like I'm an ambassador for Canon as
Mm-hmm.
well, over the last few years too, which if you told me back when I started shooting, I would not believe you. And I've been shooting with Canon my whole career, so it's a very full circle moment, and I don't think I appreciate it as enough as I should, because I'll get people asking like, "Oh, like I see you're a Canon ambassador in your bio. Like, how do I sign up for that?" You can't really sign up for to
No,
do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no. I mean, it's funny how much of a role like inbounds play in affirming like how grateful we should all be for what we have.
Mhm.
Sometimes because when you're grinding and in the moment, it's just like, is this mine? Like, is this me? And then when you get that feedback from people reaching out and be like, oh, how can I get that position? How could I be in that shape? It's like a reminder of like the incredible things you're doing. I guess that's a really awesome summary of what you've been up to the last 5 years. But at Uninterrupted now, like what's your day to day look like and what's keeping you busy?
Yeah, so for Uninterrupted, I'm their director of social media here in
Hmm.
Canada. So my day to day looks like planning for what we're outputting on a day to day basis, but also bigger picture, like keystone events, um, events to worry about, like even planning in the future, like, oh, like we got a branded contract with this athlete and this brand, like what is our social media rollout plan, like what are things that we can do outside of the general deliverables to kind of put on social. So different things like that, obviously. A little bit of more creative direction and input on kind of those opportunities as well. We do a series called What Do You Wear with Holt Renfrew,
Yeah.
which you guys may have
Yeah.
seen with a bunch of athletes coming through and kind of trying on designer stuff. So, kind of helping with the creative direction of that. And like, it's very photography heavy. And obviously, I'm the photographer on set. So, having input with that and like how the look and feel of it goes. So, hopefully, in the future, I can use those kind of skills, and not to be selfish again, but like apply it to myself if I want to go into the direction of either a freelance worker or just a contract worker, kind of taking on projects on a project to project basis. Like I still don't know like what my future holds, and I'm grateful that I have the flexibility to, um and just seeing where that goes. But yeah, the day to day is pretty much running the socials. How are we growing the socials? And looking at different accounts and seeing like, oh, like how is this account growing? And like I'm definitely addicted to my phone,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's really bad, but, like, I'm always thinking of, like, "Oh, like, this account posted this, like, can we do something similar?" Or, "They got access to this, like, can we do something similar?" I'm always a student of social media, and, like, I've grown up using it my whole life, and it's helped me get where I am today, so I'm never gonna badmouth social media at all,
Yeah.
but definitely being a nerd with, like, gaining an advantage, but also, like, coming to terms with like, okay, it's okay to like just take a break too.
Totally.
And which I do appreciate. It's more of a 9 to 5 than my previous jobs too. Obviously when it's busy season, you find yourself working around the clock, but um compared to TSN and Yahoo Sports, this is more like a 9 to 5, which is like good because it allows me to do other stuff too, but also allows me to like, oh, if I want to take the night off and not book a shoot with someone, or go out and play a sport or do a hobby or just go out with friends kind of thing, it gives me the flexibility to do that.
That's incredible. I mean, you are like the creative director for one of the more powerful sports and culture brands in the world. I'm curious, like, especially for those listening who think about careers in these spaces, defining success beyond just like follower metrics, right?
Mhm.
Like when you talk about growth and like what the KPIs are for the accounts or the platform, like that's outside of follower account, like what else is important to you as the person spearheading it?
Yeah, I think impact is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just like people engaging with your content and talking about your content. Like a lot of times, like we're so in the virtual and seeing like, oh, this thing only got X amount of likes or this many views. But it means a lot more when like people will come up to you and be like, oh, like I saw this post, or even just generally saying like, oh, I've seen you take the account from this from
Right.
zero to like whatever, and I'm sure you guys have seen it with Brown Ballers
Yeah,
as
for
well.
sure.
Um, and you guys are an account that we look at too, being like, okay, what is Brown Ballers doing, and how are they putting content together, and what is doing well for them too. So looking at different accounts like that. But going back to your success topic, I think just the impact and like people knowing what the brand is too. Like Uninterrupted is still a newer brand here in Canada too. So when I explain what it is, like often I'll have to say like, oh, do you know LeBron James? Do you know the shop? That's the company that
Yeah.
produces the shop. So here in Canada, I don't think we have that kind of keystone or signature like thing. I like we did have it with the Serge Ibaka series
The
where
cooking one?
not the cooking one, but the What About Scarves.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So that
yeah,
was a whole
yeah.
Renfrew project as
Mhm.
well. But like aside from that, just looking at like how can we impact culture and get people talking about it um through our content.
That's awesome. Super cool. So looking into the future, it's obviously hard to say this
Mhm.
because as we definitely know, like these types of careers, it's hard to project out or path out what the next move might look like. I'm curious, like, if there was like a pie chart to Kishan and like your business and your influence, like content and photography is just one slice. Like there's a lot of business, there's a lot of strategy. Like talk to me about some of the other things outside of just shooting that you're doing that maybe you want people to know more about.
Yeah, over the past few years, I've been running workshops as well through different companies. Like Canon's given me the opportunity to teach a series of workshops back when I was first kind of starting to get a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And recently working with different companies like the Remix Project and like Socality, just doing different workshops. Like recently last week, I did a kind of a short little 2 hour work, I guess not short, but 2 hour workshop
Yeah.
just talking about my process and like diversifying yourself as a photographer. And like when I talk about these things, I never would delve into like the technical aspect. Oh, like these are the settings you should be using.
Mm.
This is what gear you should be using. I'm like more holistic approach. Like this is my mindset and this is how I got to where I am. Um, and it's not like a cutter formula obviously, but like here's my process and all that kind of stuff. So definitely teaching and like sharing my knowledge is a big thing for me. um my brand as well, my mystery brand, like your photographer's favorite photographer,
Yeah.
like
Love that brand, by the way. It's
thank
so,
you, yeah,
so
yeah,
dope.
yeah,
So dope.
thank you. But like just seeing where I can take that and like how people can feel represented with that too. Like it's
Uh,
not your photographer's favorite photographer is not just me. Like anyone can feel like that too. So seeing where I can take that and like having people relate to me in that way too. And yeah, just more working with individuals one on one, helping with branding. Um social media like know-how and like okay, like whether it's sports or even working with artists or like just giving them suggestions on like, oh, you should be doing your content like this, or like you're putting out great content but no one's engaging with it, no one's watching it, so why is that
so you've got
kind of
a
thing.
consulting business basically, it sounds like.
I think so. So
Yeah.
like maybe set up that over the next kind of, I want to say year, like even
Hmm.
personally for me, like over the pandemic, I moved back into my parents' house, and then just recently, a few months ago, I moved out into my own spot. So
Nice.
like
Hmm.
getting life milestones out of the way, and
Yeah.
like obviously that's important too growing up. So doing that, traveling more as well, just business aside, just like wanting to see more of the world, and like it doesn't have to be with a camera kind of thing, just taking time. And like especially this summer, like I spent a lot of time with my friends too. Like I would come home from like shooting a Jays game and still like go meet up with them at midnight. So
Which is
like
key.
which is like I could have easily just gone home and like slept and be like, all right, I'll go to the next one. But I think like this is a really good time to like make sure you see your friends, your loved ones, because you don't know, right? Like people get married, they move away, and then you don't get to see them for maybe you only get to see them once a year or twice a year. So definitely like prioritizing that and like being aware of like, oh, like time is like really precious, right? So like kind of a sidebar, but like, yeah, consulting, spending time, traveling a bit more, um, and like maybe trying something new. I don't know what it is, but just giving myself a little bit of a challenge, whether it is media related or something outside of media. I think that would be really good just to keep myself more well rounded. And like for me, I don't want to be too locked in. Like I said earlier, I don't want to be too complacent with anything. So and I don't want to put anything out of the question too. So whatever that may be. I know that's very vague,
No,
but
it's not vague.
yeah,
To
yeah,
be
yeah.
honest, I think it's something that more people need to hear at like let's I don't want to say this stage, but just like there's a limited time before you're probably pigeonholed into certain functions or fields. Like
Mhm.
especially when you're in like a non-traditional career path. I've found. Especially being in business school right now. Like worked at the league for 6 years, now in business school. Like the idea and the feedback that I receive a lot is like you've got a limited time to like A hit life milestones and B like um figure out your pivots. Like yeah, you can pivot, but it's just a lot harder. So if you want to test and learn, like now is the time to
Yeah,
really
yeah,
get that
yeah.
thing going. So that I don't find it vague. I just find it like it's just testing and
Yeah,
learning. Yeah.
and I feel like everyone should go through that too, like, even I have friends that, we're all the same age, we all graduated at the same time, they're like, "Oh, I can't wait to retire," and I never wanna feel like that
Yeah.
too, especially, like, because, like, you're pretty much locked in for the especially the way, like, the prices of everything and the way, like, just, like, being able to survive, like, you're not gonna be able to retire for a very long time now,
Mhm.
so if you're gonna be working, like, at least do something that makes you happy, whether that is, like, pivoting what you do or discovering things that, like not to put, like, a monetary value on, like, hobbies, but, like, it's okay to change things up too,
Yeah.
and it's okay to be vulnerable with that and taking risks, and, like, obviously, you wanna make sure you're financially, like, sound because, like, last thing you wanna be worrying about is money,
Mm.
right? Like, you gotta make sure you have, like, a place to stay, food to eat, a little bit of money just to enjoy yourself too.
Yeah.
So once that's figured out, like not to like play games with life, but like it's okay to like take risks and like if you want to make a pivot, like start doing that outside of your work hours and like where that can go. So definitely for me, like allocating more time to not work, but also like allocating time to a little bit of work, but like it's not obligations. You know what I mean?
It resonates with me because I feel like, especially for the kind of work you do, like there is travel, there is going to really important milestones or like events, but it's usually under the guise of like
Yeah.
it's work.
Yep. It's always work.
You're on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious if you could just share some of the more notable events or people that you've shot in the past year and any kind of, I guess, it's silly to say fun experiences, but
Yeah.
like memorable moments through that past year.
Yeah. I guess throughout the past year, even like last year, like the ability to go um, to Vegas,
Yeah.
and shoot some pre-draft stuff for a sports management company
Yeah.
and spending like literally less than 48 hours in Arizona doing a shoot for McLean's magazine
Yeah.
with Shaden Sharp was very cool, and going to the draft with him was also
Hmm.
cool in New York. And then just travel, like a little bit of travel. Like I went to Mexico with my family
Yeah.
in December. Like I'm still thinking about all the food I ate there,
Yeah.
which was amazing. And then before that, I went back to Arizona for fun because I didn't get to really be a tourist there.
No.
So saw the Grand Canyon, went to Sedona, like rode ATVs. So like things like that, like with a small group of friends. So like taking that experience and being like, okay, like every year I want to go travel without my camera and like
Hmm.
with this group of friends. So like stuff like that. Like this year I got to go back to Vegas for summer league for that same management company. I was down at Peach Jam in Georgia too, working with Uplay, which is like
Yeah.
one of Canada's like better AAU teams.
Yeah.
Like when you think about AAU in Canada, you think about Uplay. So working with them, and then one of my friends from my high school friend group, he was the first to get married from our friend group. So
Nice.
we went to Dominican for a bachelor with 27 people, which is imagine 27 brown people
That's a
just
lot.
running around in a resort. So
Yeah.
it's a lot here, it's a lot in Dominican.
Yeah, yeah.
That was fun. He just had the wedding last week or 2 weeks ago, which was amazing. So, fun stuff like that, like being able to go outside this summer and like I feel like 2023 summer's over. I feel like, oh, I had a really good summer.
Mm-hmm.
Work wise, like during the Caravana long weekend, I got to party with LeBron, which was very cool. For his tequila company.
With Lobos.
With Lobos,
Yeah.
Lobos shout out. But
Yeah.
got to be with him. But yeah, just little things here and there. Like obviously when you sit back and reflect, spend a lot of time at the Rogers Center too,
Mm-hmm.
shooting the Jays. And this is my third season shooting the team, but I feel like I've been getting my best work this season as well. So especially when you're shooting the same thing over and over and over again, it's hard to kind of like, oh, like what am I gonna do different today? But I feel like I put it on myself to like, oh, like um try experimenting with things and shooting things differently. And a lot of photographers, like when you shoot the same high school basketball teams or the same whatever you're shooting, like it can get redundant. So like putting that on
So how do
yourself.
you make it not redundant for you?
Getting inspiration from things outside of sports, I think is important. Whether it is more kind of editorial looking photography,
Mm-hmm.
more kind of moody, dramatic photography, things that you don't see on TV. That's my biggest thing for photography in sports. Like when you shoot anything, there's let's say 5 other photographer, Getty photography, there's the newspapers, there's the other wire outlets. So like what am I shooting that's different from them? Like are shooting behind the scenes stuff? Like I don't really care for the action stuff. Like someone's gonna get that. And obviously it's in my job role to get that stuff. But like outside of that, what am I getting that's like when people are scrolling their feed, what's like, wow.
I think there's a certain photo that you took that really resonates with me, which is a player coming out of the dugout with the CN Tower and the
Yeah,
arena, and it's like very moody. And I think that's what I thought of when you talked about it's important to get photos and images that you will not see in
exactly.
the game broadcast because
You'll
we don't
never see
see,
that.
yeah, we don't see that player like with that tone or that vibe. In fact, it's pretty bland on the broadcast,
Mhm.
and that I think is why, in my opinion, like I could not speak on this at a high level, but why certain sports creators on IG do so well is because they're just showing you like sports through a different frame
Yep.
that you're used to. Like JP squared comes to mind.
Yep.
I'm always like every time I see a post, I'm like, cool. Like if I've been to plenty of NBA games, I've never felt this way when I've seen a photo or image of Jalen ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or Jordan Poole, what am I
Jordan
saying?
Poole, but he
Yeah.
was with
Yeah.
Jalen
Yeah, but he
recently, so
was
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Jordan Poole,
Yeah.
yeah. So
No, it's like and it's like people like us, like younger fans, I guess, getting the opportunity to like shoot the NBA, their favorite league, or their shoot their favorite athletes, now working personally with them and like
yeah.
I have this opportunity. How can I go in there and like make a statement? Because like for a lot of us, we don't know like, oh, maybe next game we're not allowed to shoot. Or like, oh, communications comes in and like, oh, you can't shoot. And like this has happened to me. Like
That's a what in what context?
just like access, I guess.
Oh,
Like
they've been like from this point on this part of the arena
so
or
I'm not if
something.
I'm not shooting MLB or NHL, when I'm shooting Raptors, let's say, that's through uninterrupted.
Yeah.
So they get to dictate basically like, oh, like you can only shoot from here, blah blah blah. And like over the years, it's gotten less and
Less and
less.
less?
But it's funny because the team is not as good as they were, let's say, when I first started shooting.
Mhm.
So I guess it's a MLSE thing, or I don't know what it is.
Well, I wanted to ask you, like, have you felt the pulse of basketball change since the 2019 Raptors win? Like, or not since 2019, more so in, let's say, the last few years where they haven't been as successful? Or has it
That's
still stayed is it still growing?
it's I think outside of the Raptors, it's still growing.
Yeah.
Like we have the Global Jam here. Have you
Yeah.
heard of
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And like it's still not packed out.
Hmm.
And like even like the Ontario high school finals,
Yeah.
it's still not packed out. So like there's still, but like that's just I think Toronto in general. I think people go out for the cool things and the cool things only. Like people don't mind lining up for anything. Like you'll go outside and someone lined
A lot
up
of
right
hype
now.
beasts here.
A lot of hype
A lot of
beasts
hype
there. So
beasts.
like
Yeah.
I don't know who has to be responsible of like, oh, like making these events cool. But then you'll have stuff like the CCYA, which is like the Chinese,
Yeah, yeah. With
and they
Jeremy Lin's
with
thing.
Jeremy
Yeah.
Lin, and that will be packed out, full house, all Asians.
Yeah.
So I think the niche things perform well and community stuff goes well. I'm sure if you did a Brown Ballers event here
Thinking about it.
in
Yeah.
Toronto, I feel like a lot of people will pull up. So I think Toronto is good with representing their own community, but for like just generalized things like Global Jam or like high school finals, I feel like people don't have that connection with it unless you're like a relative of the players or former player kind of thing. Like that's your alumni school. Um, but I feel like there needs to be more of that community connection.
So related to community in Toronto, I've only been here 3 times in my life. I really enjoy it. First 2 times were basketball, like coaching related things. Here, I'm just here for a wedding. I and you've traveled a lot too in North America. And I'm from the States. I feel like the soft power of being like a brown person in Toronto is very palpable. Like just in terms of population, but just also like cultural relevancy.
Mhm.
You'll see like on a bus stand, like South Asians being like the broadcasters for a radio station or something like that. Like you're just more visible and in sight. I haven't felt that in any kind of US city. I don't know if you feel the same way. I don't know. Like you were born and brought up in Toronto, right?
Yeah, Brampton.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, do you, yeah. So
Yeah.
case in point,
Yeah.
like that doesn't exist in the States. And that's
No.
really interesting to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on like the cultural harmony of Toronto. You spent a lot of time here, like why you think that is.
Yeah. I grew up surrounded by brown people.
Yeah.
Like in elementary school and high school, like elementary school, like 80% of the kids were brown.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back then too.
Yeah.
Like when
Yeah.
I grew up, I'm born in 96 and I grew up with all of that. Like now it's even
Yeah.
double.
Yeah.
I don't know what the classrooms look like. Probably 99% brown kids. So I grew up with that. That's definitely an anomaly. And like you go, let's say 40 minutes from here, like to Barrie, or like to like, which is like another town here, like Barrie or like um Ajax or like Pickering. Like now they're starting to get more brown, but like a little bit 1 hour north of Toronto, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different environment. It's just
Okay.
like white people basically. So
Really?
like here it's very like intense, I guess, with brown people. So like here, like Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto, those are like like you're just surrounded by it too. And
Yeah.
you don't second guess it too. Like there's the Indian markets and food
Mhm.
shops, and like in Brampton we have Jalo Fresco,
Yeah.
which is, have you heard of that?
Heard about it.
Yeah. So like Fresco is like, so like Sobeys owns Fresco, and Fresco is like a cheaper alternative
Yeah.
grocery brand. And in certain pockets of Brampton, they have the Chalo brand,
Okay.
which is just dedicated. Well, not just dedicated, but like they have Indian food there, like the different vegetables and different things that you can go in and feel like comfortable. Like, oh,
Mhm.
like I know I'm gonna get one. Like I'm gonna get what I need out of it too. So in Brampton, I think in BC there's Surrey as well, which is very kind of
Yeah.
like Brampton
Yeah,
too.
for sure. I've heard about
I've
that.
never been to Surrey, but
Okay, yeah.
everyone says that it's the Brampton.
We did
of the
one of our
West.
India Rising tryouts there. Can confirm. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So like
yeah.
East Coast of Brampton, West Coast of Surrey.
Yeah.
But I've just been surrounded with brown people my whole life, and definitely when I go to the States, like obviously Indian people are everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. But like when you come here, I feel at home, like I feel comfortable. Like even like when I go up to do a cottage, right? Like hour from here, 2 hours from here. Like it feels weird, like, oh, like being around, like, because even my friend group, we travel in like a
Yeah.
big group. So like 10 brown people, it's a little intimidating, right?
Yeah.
For people that haven't seen that before as well. So like definitely Brampton and Toronto, it feels home. And like people always ask me, like, oh, like, would you ever want to move for work?
Hmm.
Obviously, that's a good question to ask. Like, I've never been presented with that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I've never like really seeked it out. But I love being here. I feel at home. All my family's here. All my friends are here. So it's like, it's very hard to convince me to like leave this as well.
No, I just feel that like reflecting on culture, like being brown in Toronto is a very different feeling than other parts of the states, and that's what all the indie rising players have mentioned when we've come here for
Mhm.
training camp, and what I've said to myself as well. It's like a very palpable thing, and it's like it's really cool. Like I want to come to Toronto more. It's like got a
Yeah.
lot to offer.
But like even you say that, and like brown people I know just through sports connection, like Arvind, he works for Slam. I don't
Yeah,
know if you
yeah.
connected with him, but he's always sending me TikToks of like Toronto things or Brampton things, and like Brampton is just a suburb, but it's like so many people know
But
about
like
it
in a
too.
positive connotation or negative? Or
Can be
kind of both.
both.
It's
Can
probably
be
both.
both.
Well, I think that's also a really interesting thing combo, which may be for another time, but it's like I feel like the meme of Brampton, I would hope, should be more of a celebration on the
And
outside rather than like sorry, what were we gonna say?
that's what I tell people.
What do you said? What do you tell
It's
people?
like there's a reason why like and there's so many celebrities and artists and athletes that come from Brampton, and I think it's a suburb. There's so many people. What can we do that's like not boring, right? Like you go to Brampton, like there's no like there's a downtown, but it's not really a downtown, and then it's just like houses, right? So like, and yeah, I think with the increased population, there are gonna be things that happen, like wild
Yeah.
headlines that you read. Um, I guess good or any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some negative connotations when you tell people like, "Oh, I'm from Brampton." Like people will always have an opinion, I
People have an
guess.
opinion, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like a oh haha.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's weird to me as an outsider. Like what place do I have in
For
this
sure.
like cultural discourse? Like probably none.
Yeah.
But I would feel so lucky as to have like a cultural hub for my diaspora
Mhm.
identity in the States, but that doesn't exist. Yeah, everyone's gonna say Jersey,
For sure.
but to be fair, that might be the answer. But it's the same. It's the same, more negative than positive. Like, oh, brown dude from
Yeah,
Jersey.
yeah, yeah.
Like I'm not, but like I don't know why it carries that. And you never want to draw too many like racial analogies, but
Mhm.
I don't feel like how the black community views being from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like that's like and the cultural exports that have come out of
For sure.
Atlanta,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there is a world in which like we shape the dialogue around Brampton being that way, if that
Yeah, yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. Like,
But then that's the way we look at it too, but like we will have like people from India being like, "Oh, I wanna go to Brampton." So like
but what does that mean?
in a positive way.
Yeah,
They see
right.
that as the land of
Yeah,
opportunity, and
yeah,
like I'm sure like there's places in the States like that. Like I don't want to compare Brampton to New York, but
yeah,
like
yeah,
Indians see Brampton as their New York in
yeah.
a
And
way.
the Canadian one, which is easier to emigrate to, also too.
I
Yeah,
guess so.
yeah,
Not to compare New York and
yeah,
Brampton,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's the only time we'll
The
probably
only
hear the
time in
compare
world history where we'll be in the same sentence, but
for
that's
sure.
great.
But yeah, like it's it's cool in a way. Obviously, there are negative things that come out of Brampton, and like
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
said, like that racial discourse that way too. So um everyone has an opinion
yeah.
on
I
Brampton.
mean, that's one of the things I learned about Surrey. Like, that is a brown cultural hub, and I'm not that informed on it, but we did our training camp for India Rising there, and we met with parents of some of the younger players,
Hmm.
guys who aren't pros, who can't play for India Rising yet, but want to in the future, like 15, 16. And they're like, we love basketball, the parents. We love what basketball means to us. And the initial response is like, oh, you guys love it because it diversifies your child's like experiences,
Hmm.
what they do outside of school, um, like keeps them fit,
Yep.
exercise, even if it's not that serious. Like that's usually the answer. But they said no, it keeps our kids off the streets.
Yeah.
And we're like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on in Surrey that like I don't know about? And they're like, no, like it's not that it's low income. There is just gang violence
Hmm.
here in this predominantly brown community. And for whatever reason, basketball is the thing that tries to keep people together or like
Hmm.
keeps kids away from the mess. And that was eye opening for me because I didn't even think that that issue necessarily affected our demographic,
Hmm.
and it definitely does. And basketball being like a kind of like an ancillary like path
Like a
was
conduit towards, yeah.
yeah, it was one of these Indo-Pac tournaments in Vancouver, and it was just like eye opening.
It's like here in Brampton, like half of our Canadian World Cup team soccer
Hmm.
is from Brampton,
Yeah.
which is crazy. And it's
Yeah.
like the same thing. Like obviously there's no brown people on the team, but
Yeah.
um children of like immigrants. Their
Mm-hmm.
whole team is children of immigrants. So like just to see that is very cool. And like so whether it's soccer or basketball, like keeping the kids off the street, obviously those two sports are a lot more accessible than maybe hockey or baseball
Yeah.
for brown kids or black kids or like immigrant kids, right? So I think families draw towards those to like keep my kids off the street. Um, sometimes there's like academic requirements to even
Mm-hmm.
play on certain teams, so like keeps them in school and check. So I think sports is a great way to kind of like build out that path, whether you pursue sports outside
Mm-hmm.
of whatever you're doing, whether it's recreational or trying to be a professional or just using it as a way to kind of keep yourself fit. Um, but I think sports are a great way, and I'm always going to be biased towards sports as well.
Totally. You mean my last one on this topic is just on cultural soft power. There's clearly a lot of strong exports out of Brampton and the brown community in Canada. Everyone knows the names. We don't need to go through the names of the athletes and
Mhm.
the rappers and all that. Do you think like brown culture is mainstream in Canada? And if not, like what does it take to get there? And is that something we should like hope for, or should we just be like super happy and content with what we have?
I think it's definitely next.
Mm.
You see with music a lot too, like Universal Music has opened its own label focused towards like Indian artists, so like
Mhm.
Karnajla and like
Yep.
AP Dylan and like even Sidhu when he was around. Like
Mhm.
these are artists that impact the culture. Diljit Dosanjh,
Yeah.
like they're all these artists that impact the culture and like are slowly going into the mainstream now. And I wouldn't be surprised if you started hearing Punjabi artists on the radio, or like you go to the club, you hear a Punjabi track.
Mhm.
Seeing that in music and just seeing it in like TV too now, like with the girl from Never Have I Ever,
Right, right. My
My
tray.
Cherry,
Yep.
and then even the one that was in one of the Marvel
Miss
series,
Marvel. Yep.
Miss Marvel. So I think little things like that, like seeing more representation and like even like brown people deemed as more attractive now too. Like
Yeah.
when we were growing up, we were like, oh, like when people ask you like what's your background, you're kind of like ashamed to say
Yeah.
Indian
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
But now I think it's a lot cooler to be brown.
Mhm.
And you're seeing that in whether it's TV, culture, music, people appreciating the culture a little bit more and seeing whether it's through sports or just whoever you idolize too. Like more of those people are even like in comedy now. Like
Yeah. No, it's
you
big in
see,
comedy. Yeah.
like obviously Russell Peters, the goat
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Brampton,
Yeah.
but you're
Another
seeing
Brampton export. Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But you're
Wow.
seeing like Akash Singh and
Yeah.
like Nimesh Patel and
Yeah.
like all these other brown people. So like you're seeing them slowly pop up in like all areas of culture too. So um and obviously there's power to billions of Indians too in the world too.
For
So
sure.
um there's numbers behind it. So it was bound to happen, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm always impressed and like uh find it really exciting being in Toronto because I just feel that mainstream energy a lot more than what I do in the States. And it's always like, what can Indian Americans who are trying to influence the culture learn from what's happening in
Here. Yeah.
Toronto? I'm sorry, Toronto's way too narrow. In
In
Canada.
Canada, yeah.
Uh because and I feel like maybe you feel the same way when it comes to sports with like uninterrupted Canada and uninterrupted like the States. Like
Yeah,
there are different best practices for different
for
and
sure.
you can learn from each other in different ways. Like the reach you guys have is totally different.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And like I was saying earlier, like if you find a niche
Mhm.
and the biggest thing is engaging with community, and at the end of the day, people want to be represented. And that's why like certain like niche comedians like perform well. Like they're targeting a specific thing that's maybe only from your culture or only from um the city you're from or the place you're from. That's why like comedians like Andrew Schultz, like
Yeah.
he's loved by every community because he's able to pick certain things, whether you're black, Indian, European, like different things from their culture, and like pick things that are like, how did he know that?
Doing it so in a tasteful
In a
way.
tasteful way.
He's
Not
incredible. Like,
yeah.
yeah, source my inbound to him was his like Punjabi
Yep, yep.
kind of routine, which was so spot on. And the best thing was that the first time I had seen that element of Punjabi culture reflected in stand-up comedy was through Andrew.
Yeah.
It wasn't through like actually a Punjabi comedian
Yep.
necessarily, which
Yep.
is just funny how that works
Yeah.
out.
And I guess it gives us validation too. Like, oh,
Yeah.
here's this white
Yeah.
guy. He's one of the top comedians in the world now. And he's talking about our community.
Yeah.
And like I think of it from a social media standpoint too. Like I'm sending that to my group chat. That's getting sent on Instagram DMs. That's being downloaded, going in the WhatsApp groups, being
Yeah.
forwarded all the time. So when you think about it that way as well, going back to like social media and growth and all that, like I think community is the biggest thing and being represented. And that's why we're here today
Totally.
too, right?
Totally why we have this platform. You know, before we wrap up, like this platform, this community is obviously a social media based community. And we've validated and said, and both in Uninterrupted and Brown Ballers and other platforms, like there's a lot of value in creating online communities and tapping into niche interests. My question for you is someone who's been part of like the social media economy for a very long
Mhm.
time and a culture shaper in that. Like, do you see this steady state around social like being the status quo for some time, or is there going to be a new platform you see, or like are these ones here to stay? Like what are the big trends that you kind of predict in the next few years for social?
Yeah, I think what we have will stay.
Yeah.
The big three, it's Twitter, I guess it's X
X.
now, Instagram, TikTok.
Threads isn't replacing X. We're good.
Threads, it's so crazy to think about Threads. Like it was here, everyone signed up for it. It had like the best weekend ever of any social
Yeah.
media. Like you can't replicate that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess their lack of innovation, or like why am I using Threads instead of Twitter or X?
Yeah.
Why am I using that over the other? Because on X, I can get my news, I can get my comedy if you want that. It's very real time. I can tweet about sports in real time. I can see what my community is talking about. So it's what's the difference on Threads? And like there's little things like, oh, I like how the photos are laid out on Threads,
Yeah.
and like little things as a creator which I wish was on X. But I think I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. I feel like people are also a little bit tired of social media in general too.
I'm feeling tired. Yeah.
And I think it comes with like the doom and gloom of like the state of the world
You think?
too, for sure. And like my biggest thing is like ignorance is bliss in a like a bad way of saying.
Mhm.
Like we shouldn't know all this information this quick. And as bad as is to say, like I think the happiest people are kind of
Offline.
offline and a little bit tuned out, and like yeah, like it's important to care about certain things, but it's okay to like check out of certain, like you shouldn't know like every day you log on. Like in Canada we had those wildfires
Mm-hmm.
and they're still going on.
Yep.
And then you look at like, oh, like interest rates keep going up, and then you see an article every day like, oh, 90% of young people don't think they can afford a home. And like that's so like you wake up every day and that's what you're seeing, right? Like I'm sure like obviously like things have changed in the past whatever 20 years, 30 years, but like people back then, no social media. Obviously there's a newspaper, but like if you didn't want to know what was going on in the world, like you didn't have to. You could just live your life. You can go to the supermarket, interact with whatever, like the local people, come home, eat, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to turn on the TV. You don't have to listen to the
Yeah.
radio. But now I feel like everything's so attached to like your phone,
Yeah.
and your phone is like your lifeline, right? You don't want to leave the house without the phone, right? What
Exactly.
if someone's trying to contact me,
Yeah.
right? Like you shouldn't have to think like that too. Like obviously safety reasons, but like it's such a vital piece of like who we are too, like in a good or bad way. And like, yeah, I'm saying this about social media, but it's also helped me get to where I am today too.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like with I think people are definitely fatigued, especially after the pandemic, and now even in the States with the whole Biden versus Trump, and now even now like Trump's coming back or whatever. But yeah, just the access to information right away, I think scares people a little bit, and it's okay to like, no, I don't want to say it's okay to check out, but like you shouldn't feel like you need to know everything.
I'm not sure if there's a good solution
Yeah.
because to your point, like our whole platform here is that like built on the idea
Yep.
of like getting brown sports and cultural content out there to you that you didn't know about like right now.
Mhm.
Like
Right
when
away.
you wake up, like surprise,
Yeah, there's a
like,
new piece dropped.
oh, did you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like that's that's like what it's
Yeah,
supposed
yeah,
to
yeah.
do. And then sometimes when you're like, because I'm new to the content creation game, like I'm new to like
Yep.
managing a page and
Yep.
stuff. Like,
But that's why I love sports too, because like it doesn't matter what's like, not to be like blocking out everything too,
yeah,
but like here's something that's like 90% of the time in sports it's positive.
yeah.
Here's something that's positive. Here's why you should feel good about it.
Oh, you're saying sports content?
Just sports in general, I
Okay.
think. And like people will say like sports doesn't matter. But like then there's all this other stuff like, oh, like community and like building and like feeling represented and like putting people together. So like sports is a great break from like when you're scrolling and like, oh, this headline.
Meaning when
and
you're
this
at a live event, or even when you're seeing
Even
sports
in-
content?
in like both, like
Okay.
blocking out 3 hours, like even like when you go to the movies,
Yeah,
3 hours you're not on your phone. It's a pretty good 3 hours.
that's actually true.
right.
Like going to Oppenheimer was like a wonderful like
yeah. Yeah. You walk out and like, what day is it?
Yeah, yeah.
I went at night too, and like
Yeah,
it was bright when I entered. Came out, it was dark.
No,
so
I feel you. Like
I
those gaps of
little
times
windows.
where it's just like you're plugged out.
I don't think there's anything in life right now where, aside from going to the movies, that you're not on your phone for 2-3 hours. Name something.
Let's do this. Okay. I mean, I was at TIFF,
Yep.
so movie. And even then people were taking their
still
phone
on their
out because
phone.
like some of the films or whatever.
Yeah,
they were just
yeah.
taking their phone out.
I've never thought to like pull out my phone in the middle of the theaters.
I was so disappointed. I was
Yeah.
like, this is like a film festival where it's appreciation
Yep.
of art. You cannot
Especially-
take your phone out.
Especially when they play that little like preview before the movie,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
like, don't be a Debbie tech or whatever they
Yeah, don't do
don't
that.
text. But like I
Yeah.
guess people are doing that.
People
now.
are doing no.
Yeah.
Outside of film, outside of a movie, I can't really. Yeah, because at sports games, people are.
People are on
I
their
mean,
phone. they're
Mark
taking
Cuban's
pictures.
spoken very publicly about the fact that people will be on their phones at any live sporting event. We as a business need to figure out ways to like tap into that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
throw up your phone and get like buy a player's jersey just by like putting your camera on
Yep.
them, or like get unique stats
Yeah,
or
yeah.
the Nike shoes that they're wearing.
Yep.
Like engage someone with
Yeah,
their phone.
gamify it a little
Gamify,
bit.
yeah. So
Even like a concert. Now you see clips and like you see the Drake concert clips. Everyone's got their phone out, and it wasn't like that. Like when
artists are really big on saying like put your phone away.
put your phone away.
Put your phone away. Okay,
And
so going to a comedy show, you
yeah,
can have
comedy,
your phone
you
out.
can use your phone. And I think I would like to see that at a concert too.
Have you?
Yeah.
Well, seeing the phones don't bother me. It bothers you at a concert because you shoot concerts. So I'm curious what your like thoughts.
I've seen it change. Like,
yeah, you've seen
I've
the
seen
shift,
the crowd
probably.
change. Like for sure, when I first started shooting shows, like maybe a few people would film like a couple seconds
Yeah.
for their personal or whatever Snapchat, Instagram story. But now, like I recently went to like a Bryson Tiller concert.
Oh, nice.
And I was shooting from the crowd, and just like getting photos was difficult because everyone's hands like up.
Oh, so it makes your
filming.
job difficult.
It makes my
because of
job a
all the
little bit
phones are just
difficult. Yeah, it's a cool photo, but then I'm just thinking like, why are you at this concert if
Yeah.
you're just gonna film the whole like
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person being like, oh, like when you go to a concert, be in the moment, blah blah blah. Like I'm
Yeah.
not that deep about it, but
yeah,
like
yeah.
definitely like look at what you're seeing. You paid money for these tickets, right? Like
Mhm.
but now with concerts, it's like the whole thing with Taylor Swift, like thousands of dollars to go see this woman. Like
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But also like that's so cool. Like as her,
Yeah.
like yeah, there's a whole whatever Ticketmaster thing and resell, blah blah blah. But
Uh-huh.
like just like people are willing to spend like a whole paycheck just to see you.
Do you think there are other things you notice when you're shooting live events and concerts that like uh everyday just consumer of the event wouldn't notice because you're shooting it?
I feel like because I go to so many events and I feel like when people are at these events, they're always trying to prove like, oh, like I'm having a better time than you. You know what I
Really?
mean?
Yeah.
So
Like,
like, oh, I'm filming this. Like there's this
mhm.
person here. And you've seen it like even like when LeBron was in Toronto, did you see the clip? Like he's eating in Yorkville and there's just a line of people just watching him.
Yeah. Because
That's
they're
crazy. Like
like in
what
a bad way,
in a
right?
bad
Yeah,
way.
in a
Like
bad way.
what is that?
Yeah.
Like let him eat food. Like it was
Yeah.
never like this before. So I think like the clout that comes with like, oh, like I saw this person and you weren't here and like all that kind of stuff. So it's always trying to like constantly prove that like I'm having a better time with you
That's
than you.
interesting because you're not allowed to do that, like with your
Yeah,
job, because
exactly.
you're around all these celebrities, but you always have to check that in at the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you've never actually
Like I do
given
have
into that impulse,
I guess I have my camera and I'm taking photo. It's like different, but
but it's
like
different.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm never like, oh, like pull out my phone, like
Yeah.
here's what I'm doing, blah blah blah. Like you're behind this, and like some people are gutless too with it. So like they'll
Yeah.
pull out their phone right in your face. So like
Right.
people need to take a step back and be like, all right, what am I actually doing? Who am I doing this for? Is it for me? Like in your camera roll, how often do you like go back and be like, oh, like this is a sick video
I'm a sucker. I'm paying the like $19 to
for
2
iCloud?
terabyte iCloud
Yeah,
storage.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, I need everything.
But in a way, it's like it's good to capture those memories, but like be selective with it.
Yeah.
That's what I'll like leave the people with.
Makes sense. Any like before we wrap now, any final thoughts on, the business behind the creator economy, what you're doing, like any advice for aspiring creators? Because you get that all the time,
Yeah.
people reaching out to hopefully be in your shoes one day. Just any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like providing your POV. And like you've seen that a lot with TikTok and Reels being
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm a photographer. Here's a BTS of a shoot I did. And like
Mm-hmm.
posts like that will like perform way better than like here are the photos from the shoot. No one cares about that anymore. Or not no one cares about that anymore. Like Instagram has definitely taken a shift of like,
Yeah.
and it all comes back to storytelling too. Like here's what I like it's like a arc, right? Like here's what I did or here's the setup. Here's what I did. Here's the result. Or like in between that there's like um what was the conflict? How did I overcome that conflict? And then here's the final result. So like people like to listen to stories and storytell, whether it is videography, photography, fashion, all that kind of like, even like vlogs. Like people
Yeah.
enjoy those things. So I think aside for even like now, like people don't post one single photo.
Yeah.
They do a photo dump. That's what they're calling it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like kind of storytelling, like, oh, here is my week, here is my month, here's how my summer went. And people are like, oh, like there's like nice selfies in there, there's a travel place, maybe some food, maybe like a cultural meme in there too.
Yeah.
Like so people can relate to all that kind of stuff. So I think storytelling is a big one. So as a photographer starting out, definitely showcase that. Showcase your POV and post your work. Like I'll always say this on any podcast. Like just post your
Those
work.
should work.
You never know what post will like change your life. And you don't know that until you put it out. Maybe it's a dud, right? But then that gives you motivation for the next post. But you never know who's gonna see it. You never know which opportunities are gonna come about it. And you don't, and like on the opposite side, like you never know how many opportunities you're passing up by not posting as well. So definitely put it out there. It's free to post, right? So doesn't do well, it doesn't do well, but at least you tried.
For sure. Well, those are some awesome nuggets to leave everybody who's listening in with. So appreciate you coming on the pod again to share your journey, what the future looks like, your thoughts on just the business of the creator economy, soft power in Toronto. We went through a lot of places
Yeah.
on this pod, but it was a lot of fun. Appreciate your time today, Kishan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, G, for having me. And it was good to see you as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody. Well, you've heard it here first. Yet another episode of the Brown Ballers pod. Make sure to tune in, subscribe, like, so we can keep delivering content just like this.